Good morning. Let's try that again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, that feels good. That feels good. I have to remind you, every time I see this, everybody remembers, come on down, they'll give you this great big check. Remember, if you earn it. If you earn it. We have high productivity standards in this building. We have the same standards for people with disabilities or without disabilities, and they're pretty high. Matter of fact, there's no difference. And every time I see this, I'm reminded every time I talk to those folks down there, I said, how's Julia doing? Is she still making rate? Because we're in big trouble if she ever quits making rate, because he's got to stay there. She has become an ambassador for us. Well, I want to talk a little bit about this distribution center, but I think this extends beyond this DC, certainly in our company, and I think even into our industry, and that's why I'm so excited to be able to talk to you all today. Now, this is our first 175 hirees. Now, if you look out there, you're going to see somebody that looks like you, because we got young, we got old, we got skinny, we got not so skinny. We have all the races. They're going to find somebody like you. Now, in this picture, everybody can do the job. Everybody can do the job, and that's something we expected. And as we said, over 40% of these people have a disability. Now, we have all kinds of disability. We got cognitive ones like autism, mental retardation. We have some schizophrenia. We have physical disabilities. We got missing limbs. We got cerebral palsy. We have people in wheelchairs. We have all kinds. We expected everybody to do the job. But the unique thing about this building is we found out something better. First of all, we found it wasn't about technology. Because a lot of people look at this and say, oh, that's great. You can go ahead and build this put millions of dollars in this technology to enable people with disabilities. Good for you, Walgreens. Well, guess what? When we look back, it wasn't about technology. It was about making the decision to go forward. That was one thing we learned. The second thing we learned, that this it certainly changed the lives of people with disabilities, no doubt about that. Because most people with disabilities live life of isolation, cloistered away, don't have social relationships. You come in this building, everybody's a chatty Cathy. That's one thing it's not a big surprise. The surprise is the impact it had on the people without disabilities. In this building, the cooperation, the teamwork is better. There seems to be a purpose. When the equipment stops here, instead of chatting, people pick up a broom or a rag and start cleaning off the equipment. Now, does that happen in your DCs? Come on, be truthful. Because it doesn't happen in any of our other ones. When we had all kinds of problems here and the equipment would stop when we were during startup, all during our rollout, they had to work every Saturday from a July to November. Every Saturday to keep up, because stores didn't care who was doing the work or how the DC was working. They just needed their equipment. They just needed their merchandise. So I went down there, it worked every Saturday. July, August, September, October, November. Met with team members. I would expect 2 questions in a meeting with team members. Typical questions would be, when are you going to get this equipment working? And when are we going to quit working overtime? That's what I fully expected. They asked 2 questions there. First question, how are we doing? Second question, what can we do to make it better? Wow. Wow. Never had that happen. So instead of having to answer questions, I kind of felt bad that I had not been doing my job. When I say on that video, this is not just as good, this is better. And it's because of that, we brought in all our other general managers of all our distribution centers across the United States, not near as automated. A lot of DCs like yours, a lot of centers like yours. They saw that. They saw it wasn't about the automation, and they went back to their own buildings and have said, we want to hire 1,000 people with disabilities by the year 2010. A clear and elevating goal. Because we know if we can do 1,000, by maybe 2015 we can do 3,000, because there's so many barriers that we're going to have to find to break down, invisible barriers that we set up around our companies that we don't even know about. Now, when we started out, we started this building with the hope that we could, and the belief that people with disabilities could perform just as well as anybody else. And that has paid off. Now, we had some experience in the past of using what they call enclaves. Enclaves is when a group comes in, maybe like Goodwill, and does some specialized task over to the side, typically not time critical, typically not as key a quality around it, but you got some time. You know, we bring in some people to clean our totes, or we do some custodial work. We'd had some experience there, and that had been good. This is the first time we wanted to say, full-time employees, side by side, same standards, same pay. And that has paid off for us. Now, a lot of people ask, why did we do this? Let me tell you a reason. This is my family a couple of years ago. I'm the guy in the middle. The young man on the right, I have 3 kids. Now, let me ask, does everybody have kids? A lot of y'all have kids? Now, is this true as parents? We all know this. Every child is a lesson. Sometimes by what they say, sometimes by what they do, sometimes just who they are. And my kids are no different. Every child is a lesson. On the left is my 18-year-old who's going on 28. Over to the right is my 22-year-old who doesn't know where she's going in the future. But on the right-hand side is my 19-year-old son, Austin. Austin has autism. He speaks. Half of autistics do not speak. So we're on the lucky side of autism. He speaks. He loves Michael J. Fox, American Airlines, Beverly Hills, and The Simpsons. And if you ever get a chance to talk to him, he'll tell you about those things over and over and over and over. Loves The Simpsons. And matter of fact, his bedroom's next to ours, and the sound I hear at night, typically at night, is laughter, as he really lives those episodes in his head. Typical laughter. Never had a bad day, never had a violent moment, never said an unkind thing, never has done a selfish act. But make no mistake, his disability is a terrible disability. That's one that I'm familiar with. He has no friends. He's never been invited to a birthday party. I've never played a game, never a game of catch. He'll never marry. And when he gets out of school, he'll probably be like 95% of all kids with autism. He'll never be offered a job. And I've watched these kids come through school. Now, does anybody know, let me ask, does anybody know what an IEP is? Some of us know it, the Individualized Education Program. You got to have that. If you have a child with a disability, school systems across the United States, all 50 states, have to meet with you twice a year and go through an individual program for your child to make sure the education is adapted to them. Austin got into the school system at age 3. Next week, we'll be 16. It'll be my 34th IEP. My wife and I go there, and it's always the same. We're waiting. Some parent finishes up. Our parents come out. We go in. We go through the good things, the bad things, the challenges, laughter, tears. And when we come out, it's always the same. There's a parent or parents waiting. And I've learned this. Disabilities play no favorites. Rich, poor, old, young, traditional parents, non-traditional parents. But we share the same wish and hope. Now, this is true, I think, for most of us. Most of us go through our lives as if we're never going to die. You know, it's a reality we all know, but it's not something we live every day. It's not on your mind. But as soon as you have a child with a disability, you are confronted with your mortality. And one thing that a parent with a child with a disability, whatever disability, the first thing they think about is my time on earth is limited. And what's going to happen afterwards. And this is our hope, just to live one day longer than our child. Just one day. Because we know when they get out of the school system, they're going to be booted out, typically without a lot of support, to have to compete against a group of kids who are much better prepared. As a parent, I know this, and as an employer, I know this. People with disabilities die a death of 1,000 cuts. When it comes to employment, they probably don't drive, or if they have access to transportation, it's probably limited or limited hours. They may not be able to get through the interview process or the application process. They don't learn the way we're used to teaching. They may talk differently, they may look differently, and they suffer under the most unkindest cut, which is the belief by most of us, and I want to say 99.9%. When it gets down to it, most people believe people with disabilities can't do the job. Even a racist knows not to make a racist joke in polite company, or a sexist joke, but when it comes to people with disabilities, that's one prejudice that we all have. That helping people with disabilities is a charity. Well, guess what? We're not a charity. We only make 3 cents on the dollar. We can be as hard-nosed, and we got shareholders that drive us just like anything else. It's not a charity. But the unkindest cut is that it is a charity. A lot of these people worked a year on their own time in a training center just to prepare themselves for this. We opened the door, but they had to walk through, and they had to earn their time there every day. So, what are we to do? There's a play, an adaptation of a Greek play by a fellow named Sean Haney. And in this play, he writes about a fellow named Philoctetes. Now, I don't think anybody's got a kid named Philoctetes in this room. I've spoken to a lot of people. You might call him Phil, but his name is Philoctetes in this story. And he is a fellow who is disfigured in an injury, is disfigured and disabled, and he's left alone and deserted by his friends. Because in those times, bad things happen to you, there's a reason. So they deserted him and left him on one of these islands out in the Aegean Sea by himself for years. Nobody came to see him. And then Greece gets in this war with Troy, and they discover that Philoctetes has this magic bow they need to defeat Troy. So his friends come to him, pull up to the island, find him, and they say, "Will you forgive us? We deserted you, we were your friends. You didn't deserve this, and we were wrong. Will you forgive us? And you have something that none of us have, and that your nation depends upon. The fate of our nation depends on you. Only you can do this. Will you come with us? Will you forgive us and come with us and fight Troy?" And he does. And it's at this point in the play, the author is writing about history and hope, talking about how things in history will remain the same and bad, but in an instant, hope can overcome those, and history is changed. And this is what he writes. "History tells us not to hope on this side of the grave, but then once in a lifetime, a longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and history rhyme. So hope for a great sea change, and believe that a further shore is reachable from here. Believe in miracles and cures and healing wells." And like Philoctetes in that story, people like Darryl Perry, who you saw in the video, has mental retardation, 52 years old, never worked, #1 productivity on the receiving dock. Or people like Harrison. Harrison has autism, came out of the school system, he's 19, no prospects for a job. I met him in the training center where he was working on his own time just to prepare for the opportunity. He tells me, he says, "Randy, I can receive," now receiving is a pretty complex operation in our building. We receive about 25,000 different SKUs. Some of it comes in pallets, some comes in boxes, some of it comes in even inside the boxes, special in pharmaceuticals. So it's not an easy task. But Harrison told me, he says, "I can receive 10 cases a minute, Randy." I said, "Great, Harrison, that's fantastic." Now, but we don't measure in minutes, we measure in hours. So how many cases can you receive in an hour? How much is 10 times 60? He goes, "I don't know. I don't know." Now, I know that's 600. I know we were hoping for 400. So here's a fellow who does 150% of standard in our expectation, but he can't multiply 10 times 60. Another fellow, this fellow's in our Puerto Rico DC. He's our #1 receiver on the dock, and he works in what we call location control, does all the putaways. #1 productivity. On equipment, going up and down those aisles, deaf, mute. A lot of people say, how can deaf people drive a lift? Well, Edwin can. And he does a fantastic job. And you saw Angie, the woman with cerebral palsy in the tape. She went to college, straight A's, graduate school, straight A's, sent out 400 resumes, had 30 job interviews, and not a single job offer. And she does a fantastic job for us. We're lucky to have Angie and Daryl and Edwin. People like that, the disabled, and like Philoctetes and stories, await us. They await us to discover their gifts, they await us to harness their abilities, and they await us to value their contribution. So what are we to do? Now, I would have to ask you, this is our industry. Look around the room. Who is better qualified? Who is better prepared? Who has better resources than us in this room, in this country, to help address this? This is our industry. We have a success story. We know that this works. You do have the power to change the world. That's one thing I know. And we ask, oh boy, why don't more people do that? Well, I have to tell you, or say, Randy, why did you take so long? And quite frankly, that's probably been my biggest regret. Because I think most of us spend most of our days just with fending off the rocks and everyday living. The everyday life comes at us, and it's easy to kind of close our eyes to certain things or not hear certain noises and recognize that some of the problems somebody else is going to have to solve. But then once in a lifetime, we do have an opportunity. Now, I have to look at my own life, and I would say, looking at the poor choices I have made over a lifetime, and I promise you, I got a bunch. I got a bunch of poor choices I've made. I'm an example of what poor choices can be overcome to get here, because this has to be a luck to get to this spot. But when I look at that, probably the common element is fear. When I've made a poor choice, it's been fear of something. Either fear of failure, fear of loss of status, fear of losing something, fear of uncertainty. Fear. Fear keeps me quiet when I should speak. Fear has made me hesitate when I should have acted. Fear makes us small. It makes us shrink from the world. And fear denies us our grand opportunity. A woman, Marion Williamson, wrote one time, "What is our deepest fear?" If you see the movie Coach, Carter, it's quoted in there. What is our deepest fear? And she goes on to say, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light that frightens us, not our darkness. Fear makes us shrink. It makes us smaller. And we say, gee whiz, who am I? Who am I to do something? Who am I to make a difference? There's a lot more people better qualified. Really? Well, I'll tell you, I was in San Francisco picking up a car to go out to our center in Sacramento. And I was at the Hyatt Regency there, and I had a little time, and I went to the washroom, and it's down this long hall. And I go down there, and I come out of the restroom, and there's this man there who's boot black. It's just him. And just him and me. And he says, hey, you need a shoe shine. Now, a lot of times in airports, you can kind of walk by that stuff, but I'm at the end of a 30-foot hall. It's just him and me. I said, okay, I got time. So he starts shining my shoes, and he starts telling me. I said, his name is Alan Feaster. I remember his name. So we get to talking. I said, how long have you been a boot black? And he goes, 30 years. I said, wow, that's a long time. How much longer are you going to work? And he goes, well, actually, I'm thinking about retiring. Well, what are you going to do? Well, then he pulls out this notebook, and it's got all these newspaper clippings. And he says, what I want to do is I want to be a better advocate for the California penal system. Because we have this thing in California called the California Youth Authority, in which we hold boys in the same cells with men. And my 14-year-old son, Darrell, and his friend were picked up and incarcerated and thrown into this cell with men, and they were both found the next morning hanged and dead. And California said it was suicide, and I know my son didn't commit suicide. We've got to change the system. And that's what he's been doing. And he had a stack of clippings like this. He showed me a picture of him with Governor Schwarzenegger. I went on Google 696 references to Alan Feaster, a bootblack, 30 years. If he can do that, what can we do? What can we do? Now I ask you to think back, recall your idealism. What kind of world did you want this place to be? What kind of world did you want this place to be? Because the question is, will hope and history rhyme? History tells us that people with disabilities will always remain on the outskirts of society, living those lives of seclusion. Hope. Hope tells us one day we will reach out and embrace them and claim them as our own. Now let me ask you, so as we get close to closing, do you know somebody with a disability? Do you hold somebody in your heart with a disability? Will hope and history rhyme? That's for us to answer. Now, as for me, I choose to believe in miracles and cures and healing wells. And I know that what links us is something more important than just dollars and cents, although dollars and cents is important. We always talk about mission. This is meaning. This is the best thing we have ever done. I choose to believe in miracles and cures and healing wells. I believe we can make a difference. And I believe our moment is now. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.